The next project is 25 East Washington Lobby, lighting design firm Schuler, Jim Bainey and Brian Wiley designers. This landmark building, formerly known as Marshall Field and Company Men's Store Annex, was built in 1914 by iconic architect Daniel Burnham. The lobby renovation aimed to restore it to its original grandeur and provide an attractive and safe gateway to the rest of the building and to Chicago's underground tunnel system. To illuminate the intricate ceiling detail, Jim and Brian worked closely with the architect and came up with a carefully crafted cornice rail designed to conceal the new cove lighting. The custom metal cornice was painted to match the existing marble and fitted just above the existing cornice, creating a seamless detail. Make it look like it's always been there was kind of the motto. Scale drawings and mock-ups were critical. The LED cove fixtures were all adjustable and different lengths. Jim Bainey noted that the contractor was wonderful. Vitrines concealed over the years now feature highlighted textured stone. Sightline studies were needed to ensure that lights were not visible. Existing pendants were retrofitted with LED lamps. Congratulations to Schuler, and accepting the award is Brian Wiley.
Thank you so much for the award. I do want to thank Jim Bainey, who was integral to working with me on this project. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today to accept the award with us. We also want to thank the owner of the building, Aspire Properties, the wonderful architect that we collaborated with, East Lake Studio, our general contractor, who was amazing, Bullion Andrews, the MEP team, IMEG, and the electrical contractor, Palos Electric. And of course, we want to thank the NLB for the award. Thank you so much.
We're recognizing another one of our winning projects in the 2021 Tesla Awards, and it's 25 East Washington Lobby. Jim Bainey from Schuler and Brian Wiley are the lighting designers. So congratulations, folks. It's a beautiful project. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And I'd also like to welcome three of our judges, Naomi Miller, Terry McGowan, and Jim Yorgi. So thank you, folks, for joining as well. In order to reveal this historic ceiling without penetrating the ceiling, your design features an all-up lighting scheme. So what challenges in crafting and installing this custom cornice rail that conceals the new cove lighting were you able to overcome? And any tips or best practices for others who might have some similar constraints?
Thanks, Mary Beth. Hey, it's great to be here. We're excited to be with you all. And thank you for that question. I think, this was a project where we worked very closely with the architect. And as always, we're trying to make something look complicated, look like it's always been there, but operate and function very simply and not cost a lot of money. In this case, the architect essentially created just a bent metal cove that sits now on top of the existing stone cornice rail. So we just essentially enlarged that top cornice rail and concealed the light fixtures inside of that. And this bent metal cove was then painted out to match the stone. I suppose one of the challenges was there is a portion of the lobby that has a radius to it. And because of that radius, we needed to have that cove fabricated in a radial fashion around the corner, and then work the fixtures in such a dimension so that they could make that radius turn the corner. The other thing is whenever you get cove fixtures right up against the back of a cove, there's always a possibility that you might see little dark spots, or what used to be called socket shadows when socket shadows still existed. And we wanted to make sure through some mock-ups that we had a nice, clean, continuous line of light on the back wall of that cove, and then also certainly on the ceiling, making its way around. So those were a few thoughts that I had on that, on how that was put together.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is how critical the mock-up was to this project. One of the concerns from the team was the size of that cove and making sure that it would be big enough to conceal the fixture and big enough to be able to access the fixture while also keeping it visually small. And so we worked through a few different scaled drawings with the architect, and then using that mock-up to really show the whole team what that would look like installed was really critical to the design and getting everyone on board with that idea.
What about the lighting for the vitrines? That obviously a really very impactful part of the design. Again, any special challenges for that application?
Yeah, so this was actually a really fun element of the building. So in its original use, when this was part of the men's store annex, these were old vitrines that displayed product. So in later design or redesign of the space, these were kind of covered up and concealed and had those darker panels on them. Part of our goal for this was to bring new life to those as a special moment of the space and a focal point, and sort of embracing what they once used to be in a modern way. So with the textured stone there, we wanted to add a grazing light to really highlight that stone and show off that texture. But one of our considerations with the design was the fact that people were going to be walking right up along these all day long. And we wanted to make sure that the fixtures themselves were concealed, while also making sure that there was plenty of space in that cove to access the fixtures and maintain them should they ever need to be accessed. So keeping it large enough while also keeping it small enough that people aren't seeing. So we did a lot of sightline studies and looked at the design elements of the space of the existing conditions to see how much wiggle room we had in terms of recess depth. And I think that was a critical part to the success of this detail and really bringing new life to those old display vitrines.
Yeah, just to jump in, we oftentimes hope that we can have a bit of an impact on the architecture, knowing how closely the architecture and the lighting are married together. In this case, we worked closely with the architects on the textured wall. So we told them that we thought it would be best if it was light colored, best if it was had a nice texture to it. And then they started looking into some different options for that. And they ended up going with a raked stone treatment, which is very interesting. One of the detail shots that we sent with our submission shows the detail of that. They essentially take a piece of stone, which is polished stone, and then they rake it in an industrial process by which they tear away most of that polished surface, and it leaves this sort of honed finish underneath in a very rough and textured way. So that was a nice aspect of the collaboration with the architect, and that detail really doesn't work well if you don't have the texture, it doesn't work, and if you don't have the lighting placed right, it also doesn't work. So we always are grateful for good collaborators on our projects.
I like looking at the before and the after photos and how remarkably different they are, how much more uplifting the current lighting design is. You focus on the ceiling, you have the brightness in the vitrines, you can see the grills below the vitrines, all those lovely details that were kind of lost before. So I think you did a beautiful job and a simple job. I mean, it's hard to do a simple job, but you did a simple job, beautifully detailed, that is really going to hold up for a lot of years.
Thanks, Naomi. Yeah, and I think all of us as lighting designers are tempted to try to squeeze downlights in, right? To get a little bit more light on the floor or to highlight something. And we kind of fought against that a little bit. We had a couple of spots where we were hoping to squeeze some downlighting in, and the architecture just didn't really allow for that. And I think looking back on it, it's probably good that we didn't and we couldn't, and we had to kind of fight against that instinct. There is one corridor in the space that has a new ceiling, and we did add some downlights there because there's an elevator lobby that we wanted to make add a little bit of wayfinding lighting, but we didn't touch the historic ceiling, and I think that's probably for the better.
Agreed.
The brightness balance is so much better there, and I think regarding your comment about downlights, I'm so glad you didn't, because of course you get bright spots on the floor reflecting up into your eyes as you walk along, and this seems like a very pleasant space to walk through. And I got to thinking, what did those vitrines look like before? Did they have advertising on them? Were they posters or events that people were supposed to read? Just what's the history of those?
Brian, do you know that?
Unfortunately, I don't. The only historic photos that we were able to find were of a renovation after they had sort of pulled out the display vitrine. So that's always been a little bit of a mystery to us. So we tried to, think about what we thought they might look like, embrace that factor. But unfortunately, yeah, we don't know their true, purpose, if it was posters or product or something else.
Yeah,
Let's just imagine that it was a series of top hats being displayed.
Could have been. Yeah, I mean, they're fairly shallow, so you couldn't put anything super deep in, but certainly hats would fit in there, shoes would fit in there, scarves, ties. I mean, I'm sure they could do some pretty interesting things. I guess I've always thought, being Marshall Fields, that it's likely there was some sort of product displayed in those. And we've worked on some vitrines in some of the newer retail buildings on Michigan Avenue, and they're a little bit deeper, but typically if it's a clothing manufacturer, clothing store, they're putting some of their nicest products out there in the front where people can kind of see them and get excited about coming in. So that's, I guess, what I've always imagined were in those vitrines originally.
I assume the color temperature of the lighting was selected very specifically. Was there any thought to going to tunable white to maybe reflect the changes in daylight color temperature as people came into the space?
I think at the time when we did this, the tunable white technology was really just kind of coming into play. This project, I don't know the exact date of completion, but it's been done for a little while. It's all LED, but at the time, we weren't specifying a whole lot of tunable white. I think if we were to look at it today, there are many more products, easily specifiable products that we could use. There's not a ton of daylight here. There's daylight at basically the ends of this sort of L-shaped corridor. So we probably wouldn't have gone too cool, given the fact that this is such a historic building, and it might feel a little bit out of place. But you're right, when you come in from outside during the day, it would be nice to be able to cool this down a bit and then warm it up in the evenings. We do have this dimming system on the project for that very reason. So during the day, we typically have these light levels a little bit higher to balance with the bright daylight when you make your way in, to minimize that sort of tunnel effect that you can get when you come into an interior space and your eyes are trying to accommodate that. So in the evenings, we dim the light levels down quite a bit.
Yeah, okay, that's good use of the controls.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Can you tell us about the elevator lobby? I'm looking at the photo now, and although I want to rip the US mail repository off the wall and bring it home with me, I'm also noticing how beautiful those elevator doors are.
Yeah, I think this is one of the spots where Jim was talking about us wanting to put some downlights into the ceiling and put a little puff of accent light on these, because they're really beautiful. Same with that mailbox. I was wondering where you were going with taking it off the wall, because I think we've all really thought it was really beautiful and gorgeous. And than to say that you wanted to take it home with you. I understand now where that comment was coming from. So no, these were really, really beautiful. And I'm actually really happy with the amount of light that they still do get from the Cove uplighting, because these are a really special moment in the space.
Yeah, and a couple of other elements here we didn't talk a lot about. The light fixtures that are the pendants were actually retrofitted or upgraded in a project we worked on. I don't know, it may have been 12 or 13 years ago. Those pendants used to have an opaque bottom to them. So 12 or 13 years ago, to make them a little bit lighter visually, we had these fixtures retooled so that they had a glowing bottom and more uplight to get light onto the ceiling. This is before they were entertaining a complete renovation. And so when we got to this renovation, we really only had to relamp those with LED, and they continue to do their job well. Also, the elevator call lights were upgraded to LED as well, but those are historic as far as we know. They've always been there, and I think have been retrofitted through the years to a bunch of different technologies as those technologies enter the scene. So yeah,
that's the beauty of medium base sockets. You can upgrade them as the technology changes.
That's right. And those pendants and the fixtures over the elevator doors, the elevator call lights, are the only fixtures I think on the project that do have medium base sockets. But we were very grateful that we had some, and we looked at some different lamps to make sure they matched the color temperature well with the integrally driven LED product. So worked out well.
So what's been the response to this space? I mean, this is really the portal, right, to the rest of the building and Chicago's underground tunnel system. So what kind of feedback have you gotten?
All the feedback has been very good. The owner they're a great client to work for, and they've since hired us to do another project in the adjacent building that they own. In this project, they had an architect in mind, and they had us in mind, and they put us together, and that doesn't always necessarily work out well. In this case, it worked beautifully. I think that the tenants in the building have really appreciated the upgrade. Brian and I were chatting a little while ago about the underground tunnel system, which the entrance to that is right next to one of the entries to the building. So it does mean that more people come through this lobby than certainly would have if that were not the case. And I think it is another sort of great stopping off point or great gateway down into that system, which will be used more and more as the weather gets colder and colder here in Chicago. So overall, everything we've heard has been very positive from the client and the tenants of the building.
And I think, the fact that this is a landmarked building, and Chicago's known for its architecture, and people come to see it and do tours of it, just, put the pressure on for this to be a really successful design, and to bring new life to it in that sort of a respect, so that the people who are coming to the city can appreciate this historic architecture from Chicago and have that special moment when they come into the space, even if they're just going to sneak down into the underground tunnel or go up to see their dentist. We always want people to appreciate Chicago's beauty.
Yeah, is there a program in Chicago to preserve spaces like this? I always go hunting for them whenever I go to Chicago, and this seems like one of those that ought to be added to the list if there is such a program.
There is Terry, there is a program. Chicago Landmarks is very active in the city, and also national. There's also national designations as well for some of the buildings in Chicago, but they are very active and very involved in projects like this. This particular one, we didn't see Landmarks a lot for an interior project. They do get involved quite often when we're doing building facade lighting. And we've worked with them on probably 10 different projects in Chicago, where we have a review process where there are drawing reviews and then also daytime and evening mock-ups of different effects. So we know them well. For this project, there wasn't that kind of scrutiny, but I could see eventually this building taking on more of that sort of landmark status.
Were there any surprises? Were there anything you did anticipate that you had to resolve?
Most of what we predicted, I think, came to pass. I think during the construction period, there was a time when perhaps some of the fixtures in the cove needed to be adjusted so that they weren't visible above the top of the cove. There's always a little bit of a dance going on where you try to get that fixture as close to the top of the cove as you can so that you get as much light out and it's as uniform as possible without seeing the top of it. And so oftentimes we'll have a blocking detail where they'll block the fixture up just a little bit, sort of shim it up to make sure that we get it in that exact right position. And the fixtures, all these fixtures are adjustable. So we needed to go in there and aim every one. I think a lot of them are, some are 4 feet. When you get to the radius, I think, Brian, they were 1 foot fixtures. Is that right?
Yep,
Yeah.
that's correct.
So it goes pretty quickly. Usually what we'll do is we'll do a portion of it. We'll get up on some ladders and do a portion of it. And we'll do that with the contractor. And then we'll just kind of set them loose on the rest of it and then come back and take a look to make sure that everything looks uniform. We had a great contracting team. The general contractor was wonderful, and they do a lot of special projects like this. So we really were able to lean on them during CA to get some of that work done. Brian, do you recall any other issues?
Oh, that's really a great detail. I'm so glad you added that because it's one of those practical things that, well, I know it's not thought of in so many installations you can see, but
Right.
To fine tune it like that, wow, that makes it come to life.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
helps.
I remember the first time Jim and I walked into this space together and we were like, that ceiling is gorgeous. And the amount of detail that was there is just stunning. And in the way it's been preserved over time, it just looks incredible. And we kind of looked at each other and we were like, we have to find a way to light this. Like, we have to get light up there. Like, that's the answer. Like, this ceiling needs to have its moment.
Who was the manufacturer for the cove fixtures that you ultimately decided on?
The Color Kinetics.
Oh,
Yeah, and that's true of the uplight cove as well as the vitrine. So we wanted to use the same manufacturer there so that they have a different beam spread. The uplights are very broad and the vitrines are very, very narrow to graze the wall, but the chips are very close in terms of their origin and color temperature. So that's something that at least we didn't have to worry about.
Very good. Well, if there aren't any other questions for our designers, thank you all for participating. And again, congratulations on an absolutely beautiful job. And we all got to make a field trip to Chicago and see this beautiful building.
A Marshall field trip, don't you think?
There you go.
You're all welcome anytime. And we just wanted to let you know how appreciative we are for the Tesla Awards and for you all as judges. It's been a pleasure and an honor to win this award. So thank you so much.